Hey everybody, good morning. It's David, MSOM 602, coming to you today from Burgos, Spain. This is about 2.5 hours north of Madrid in the Castile area. Just a beautiful little city. Um, yeah, the cathedral that you see behind me is kind of the center point here. It's part of it's UNESCO World Heritage Site. Began construction in 1221, but just kind of one of the hallmarks here. One of the things, I'll spin it around a little bit. There you can see it's very early in the morning here, so I'm the only one out looking for coffee um, on a Saturday morning. So just a great place. I wanted to go through lesson 2 as a review, and then we'll preview lesson 3 coming up for you, okay? Lesson 2, the discussion board this week, gave you an interesting video. It gave you some examples of conductors who have different style of leading their orchestras. And some of them you could see were very demanding, and some of them were not as demanding. And the video was called Lead Without Saying Anything. And certainly what you'll find in leadership situations today, there are nonverbal things that can happen. There are verbal things that can happen. I was told one time that if someone comes up to you and says, I'm a leader, chances are they're not, right? And so one of the key things I wanted to point out this week, and I put it kind of briefly in the question about the difference between demanding and commanding leadership. When you think about demanding leadership, those are the ones that are really power focused. Those are the ones that say my position creates this thing, so therefore I am a leader. Or they demand it through the things that they say. Versus commanding leadership is more of a leadership focus based upon the actions of an individual. And so you can see the difference between a power focus and one that I think is truly earned through command. So I appreciate the discussion board post that you had this week on that particular topic. The memo exercise this week, and hopefully you began to put some of your own application into practice on these, is dealt with you being part of an organization, and what you're going to be doing is creating and moving to a servant leadership model. And so that servant leadership organization, or your organization, needs to make sure that what you're doing is very, very clear to them. And unless you define those things to people, they will define it for themselves. And many times the definition that they come up with will be different than the definition that you intend it to be. And so it's very, very, very important in anything that you do to provide that level of definition. Your workers may not agree with you, but what they may be doing is looking for some type of clarity from your perspective, so they'll be able to understand the approach that you're taking and the lens through which you're going to approach this topic. And so it was important for you very early on in this to define for your people what servant leadership is. And so again, in memo exercises, it's important for you to be very brief in those, to be very clear, not to go too far, not to provide any type of academic exercise, because you are talking to your people. And then the application this week talked about the importance of servant leadership in the workplace, and how can you deal with that, and how can you do that when there's such diversity in the workplace today. And that could be obviously ethnic and gender diversity, but I was more interested in comments on thought diversity, because there are so many approaches to leadership, as you're able to see in the discussion boards, that it's very important, I think, to have some degree of diversity in the way that you think, the way that the people around you think, or you can become very, very stale. And you can lack innovation. You can have all kinds of different problems in organizations without that level of diversity. Okay, so that was lesson 2. We jumped right into beginning to talk about servant leadership. Lesson 3, we're going to get even more specific. The discussion board this week introduces you to Spear's 10 servant leadership characteristics. And what I'm asking you to do is to take what you believe the top 5 of those to be. If you had to stack rank those, what would be the 5 most important ones of the 10 that Spears put out there? Now, again, all 10 of them are valuable and viable, but I'm more interested in the 5 that you pick, not necessarily what the 5 are, but why you pick them. So I'm interested in your dialogue, your understanding on why those 5 are there. I've already posted in the discussion board my top 5. Again, you don't have to agree with me on these, but I told you in my post why I thought those top 5 were the most important. And then there are 2 application exercises this week. One is from the book Lead with Love, and that's a conversation. It's an interesting book. It's a conversation between Ken Blanchard and Colleen Barrett, who's a former CEO of Southwest Airlines. And so you'll come up with some really interesting concepts in that. You'll hear about the triple bottom line, which a lot of companies today are moving towards. And so I love the dialogue that's there and the talk about very practical applications as it relates to servant leadership. And then the second application this week talks about a place you and I just love to go to, and it's the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles. And you're going to read a story about Ken Blanchard's experience at the DMV that wasn't quite what he thought it was going to be, and how the leader and the director of that DMV really exhibited servant leadership characteristics. So the applications this week, I think, are very good because what it does is it shows you servant leadership in action in the workplace today. All right? Hope you have a great time. Again, I'm totally accessible whenever you need me. Talk to you soon.